Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Lauren Feldman, and I'm here with Gene Marks. Hello, Gene.
Hello, Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing just fine.
Gene, it's great to have you back here. We haven't spoken about AI in a little while. You've got a story that just came out in The Guardian that I thought was really intriguing about how leaders of businesses are trying to reduce their headcount using AI, but they're not always happy with the results. Tell me about that.
So this was a survey that came out. There was more than 1,000 business leaders. It was done by some software company called OrgView, who I've never heard of before. But they interviewed these business leaders, and apparently a great many of these business leaders had laid people off, Lauren, because to replace their jobs with AI. So they literally laid people off to replace them with AI. And more than half, it was something like 55% of them, said that they regretted the decision. So they laid people off for AI. This is 2025, not 2035, 2025. They literally laid off their employees for AI. I mean, it's like that's all the employees' biggest fear.
Is this across the board? Do you know what kinds of jobs these were? Or
it was across the board, mostly administrative and sort of marketing, all back office jobs, right? So it wasn't like they were being replaced by robots because people can't, it's not like that's an affordable thing yet. So it was like back office stuff. And they didn't get anything more specific than that in the survey. Like, well, what were these people doing? Because first of all, I write about AI. I'm doing this now like 6 times a month in Forbes. And it's a big topic, and people are like, I'm not seeing, unless you're a giant company, I'm not seeing smaller companies laying people off yet because of AI. It's obviously everybody's biggest fear.
Wait, it's not your biggest fear, Gene. It's your biggest hope.
Not my biggest fear. Excuse me. Employees' biggest fear.
Right.
It is my biggest hope. But it is when I wrote in The Guardian, I was like, literally, I questioned the sanity of the people that did this. I feel like the managers that laid off people, they're the ones that should have been laid off for making such a dopey decision. And I'm going to give you the example why. You ready for this? So when I first addressed this article, I wanted to, use it as a point where like big tech is duping people into believing that AI is so mature you can start replacing people with it. So I asked ChatGPT, Lauren, you ready? I said, give me a quote from 3 technology leaders where AI is already making businesses more, where you can lay off employees and replace them with AI, right? It gives me this quote back from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, right?
I've heard of him.
Yeah. The quote is, AI is already making businesses more efficient, more responsive, and more personalized. It's a growth driver. That's what Tim Cook said. Okay. And then I said, can you give me the source of that quote? I mean, he's saying it's making businesses more efficient already and more responsive and all of that. Can you give me the source? ChatGPT comes back to me and goes, I apologize for any confusion earlier. The quote attributed to Tim Cook does not appear to have a direct source from a verified interview, speech, or official Apple communication. ChatGPT gave me a fucked up quote, and it didn't even tell until I told it, till I had to ask it about it, right? And I'm like, you're laying people off, and replacing it with this technology right now, which like in the basic sense, it still doesn't work as reliably. Do you know what I mean? It was just to prove the point that the people that are thinking that like AI is so reliable and accurate and complete now that they can use it to lay people off. I mean, you're out of your mind. We're nowhere near that. And by the way, don't get me wrong, it's great.
I was going to say, I know you're looking forward to the day when you can tell everybody to do precisely this.
Yes, I am. But that's, I'm looking forward to the day when I can actually regrow hair on my head without it being like a health concern. I mean, there are all things that we have visions for. I mean, I use ChatGPT. It helps me find hotels or translate or, fix, give me advice for fixing something or whatever. It's great. It's all fine. But that's all like, and most of the clients I know that are using these AI platforms are doing just that. I mean, it's like reviewing contracts or, writing an email better, or creating a blog. It's all good. It's all good. But replacing your employees yet, because of, of AI, I mean, it's unbelievable. So in my Guardian piece, I just wanted to, just make sure that everybody knew that why this is not reality. I mean, number one, this technology like doesn't exist right now that's going to replace employees. I mean, Microsoft,
Well, wait a
Intuit.
second. I mean, there are things that AI is already really good about, and you and I have talked about them. And I've done other podcasts with the regulars on this
Mhm.
podcast who they use it for things like creating a proposal in
Sure.
in 10 seconds that would have taken 3 people 2 days to create.
Yes.
Um, so I'm sure there are times when people find ways to use AI that either frees their people up to do something else or to work somewhere else.
Oh, exactly. It is a great productivity tool, Now, when you look at like Microsoft right now is rolling out this year their AI agents, and a bunch of these, business platforms are doing the same thing. And I'm warning anybody listening to this conversation, these AI agents, I mean, don't go firing employees because you think these AI agents are going to replace them. I do think one day they're going to replace people. I really do. I think we're a few years off from that, but it's coming. In the meantime, though, keep your people and make sure that they know how to use these agents so they can be as productive as possible, and we'll see what cream rises to the top when it comes to your employees. But right now, these agents, these tools, they're immature, they're limited, they're unreliable. You're not laying people off in 2025 and replacing them with AI in your back office. Secondly, AI is going to have an issue and continue to have an issue with just security and privacy of data. I mean, to really leverage all of these things, you're basically allowing Microsoft and Google and OpenAI and all these software companies to grab your data to let these agents process it. And I have a lot of companies that are very hesitant to do that. Ultimately, I guess they're going to have to just, drink the Kool-Aid, but there's just a hesitancy for that, and building these systems are super expensive. I mean, I'm just saying that there's big things coming in the future, and I get that. And AI is going to make people a lot more productive. But right now, this is not. It's all hype right now. I mean, all we should be doing is watching and playing and testing it, and keeping an eye on it. But again, we're still a little bit of ways before we're going to start relying on this stuff to like do our core business operations and then lay people. So it just surprised me. And it didn't surprise me, excuse me, when these survey respondents were like, oh yeah, we laid people off to replace them with AI and now we're regretting it. It's like, well, yeah, you dope. Because you don't do that
Did
now.
they talk about how they figured out that it was a mistake?
No, I mean, again, the survey didn't reveal that either. I mean, I guess maybe because people were just too ashamed of themselves for actually admitting that they just made such a ignorant decision. So I just, I mean, again, and it's funny in the Guardian article, because I cover this stuff. So I've been writing about these companies like Boston Dynamics that have these, unbelievable. If you ever really want to see some crazy stuff, go on YouTube and look up Boston Dynamics. They do robotics. So they have these very human like robots. And by the way, NVIDIA and, Tesla are developing their own robots, very human like, with Google type technology, where these robots can sense and see things around them and really do some amazing stuff. They're all first of all, they're expensive right now. They're still a couple $100,000 a piece, and they're still, we have a ways to go. But when you look down, the pipeline, you can definitely see these robots coming into warehouses and cleaning offices and doing tasks that businesses are people are doing right now. The other thing is I wrote in Forbes yesterday as well, this past Sunday. There's a company called Aurora. They're now rolling out autonomous trucks in Texas, and they've gotten permits to do it. And they've got autonomous trucks now driving down highways. They get to a populated area and they pull over, and then a human gets in and picks it up from there, because you can't trust them to do that stuff. But that's massive. I mean, truck drivers are expensive, and their insurance issues and, healthcare issues and all of that. And this technology it's getting closer and closer. And I think within a few years, we're going to be seeing a lot more autonomous trucks on highways because they'll just be safer and more reliable than a human. So all this is coming. I get that. I just get that. But the point is, like in 2025, I was just blown away that people are actually still thinking they can replace humans with AI. It's just not reality right now.
You mentioned the AI agent thing that Microsoft is rolling out.
Yeah.
As I understand it, the sell with that is that businesses all use 10 or 12 platforms, for one thing or another. And with this kind of agent AI, you can bring it all together and just have one platform that'll do your CRM and your payroll and, your word processing and everything else that you do on all these different platforms. Bring it all together in one place, simplify everything, make it more efficient.
That's not my take on it, Lauren. That's not my take. My take on it is that they're still going to have different platforms. I think the mecca of business software is that we just do have everything under one roof, and it's going to take a little while to even get there. That's been a complaint of clients ever since I've been in this business. Microsoft, for example, still has like 2 different accounting applications, under its Dynamics umbrella. And then it has CRM applications and Outlook and Office. It's got data everywhere. It's still a disaster under the hood. You know what I mean? The agents, though, are specifically for Dynamics. And for their financial dynamics. So, the agents are supposedly like, you tell your agent, hey, create a purchase order for this supplier with this range of pricing that I will allow, and then the agent just goes out and does that. When the end of the month comes, their financial agents will just close the books, make the recurring journal entries that an accountant would make, and then check the reconciliation between the cash accounts and bank accounts. These are all repetitive, easily replaceable tasks that a bot can do as opposed to, a human doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the same thing, like both Dynamics and Salesforce are introducing agents where you're going to, you talk to it and you say, go and create a campaign for everybody with blue eyes and green hair who's an Eagles fan, and send them an email that tells them this. And then the agent just picks up the ball and runs with it. That's what these companies are saying that their agents are going to be doing. And it makes me shudder when I think about that, because we have a long way before we can rely on agents to do that right. And then they're sending out emails to our customers, in our community. Can you imagine? I mean, it's just, I just see that. I see a lot of problems.
So you're not going to be one of the first adopters?
No, I'm not going to be adopting that right away. But I think it'll get better and better with it. I think what the key to it all is going to be the data, Lauren. I wouldn't rely on a Zoho agent to send out emails to my Zoho database, because my Zoho database is still, screwed up in so many ways. But I think it'll get better at validating stuff, like the agents, the next generation of agents. Before it sends out the email, will check the data in my Zoho database and then validate it against external data somewhere else, email addresses or mailing addresses or name spellings or whatever, make corrections, and then go forward with the campaign. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think as it gets smarter and smarter, I think businesses will then be able to rely on it to do those kinds of stuff. The other thing I want to also just say is, you talk about like the different databases, and I'm talking about agents. So Microsoft, Anthropic, Google, they've, and a few other of the big tech companies have released their agents that control your device. So you can see this on YouTube as well. There's you tell it. There's an example that one, I forget if it was Microsoft gave, but you just tell your computer, your laptop, you're like, hey, go out and find 10. Here's a list of companies that are my competitors. Go find their websites, find out who their CEOs and their VP of sales are, get their contact information, and put it into a spreadsheet. And then you watch the video, and it just starts but it starts like just clicking through screens, going to websites, grabbing the data, and then putting it into a spreadsheet. And then it all finishes. And then here's the completed spreadsheet, just like you would have like a high school kid do, on like a separate project. That's what the agents are doing right now. I mean, they've got agents that do that right now. That's what they plan on rolling out for businesses to use. It's exciting stuff. But it still will need some testing.
So I guess I got my wires crossed or my stories crossed. I've certainly read about agents the way you've described them. I thought part of the pitch was also the idea of bringing everything together under one roof. Maybe I hallucinated that.
I hallucinated. You mean you were wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. But that is one of the ultimate goals, though, isn't it? Are we getting closer to that?
Yeah, I mean, inching in that direction. It's even Zoho, which we sell. They say they're in this one business, one system, but they still have different databases, and they're positioning themselves as an integrated, one under one umbrella kind of thing. Most systems that are out there, these ERP systems, are still cobbling together data from different places. The only way you can really get there is if you just drink the Kool-Aid and buy into one big platform and suffer the features that they might have that you don't like, or lack of features, because you want that integration. That's the choice that you make. Like, for example, like say I was just at the Epicor conference. They're like a big distribution and manufacturing software company, right? So very good. They've got great modules for distributors and manufacturers, and that's fine. But they also have CRM modules, and they also offer a little bit of HR. Now, the CRM modules aren't as good as Salesforce, and their HR offerings probably aren't as good as some other companies that just focus on HR, And then they offer some project management, but it's probably not as great as like an Asana or a Monday. There are companies that really do it. That's what they do, So, but if you're a company, you're a customer of Epicor, you might be like, you know what? All right, they're not going to be as great as some of the greatest applications out there, but they're good enough, and I'll give that up so that I can have everything under one hood. Do you know what I mean? And that's a choice that a lot of businesses are going to have to make.
Isn't somebody going to try to do it like ChatGPT? Just try to bring you can bring your own platforms together under our roof, and our agents will allow you to use Salesforce plus Rippling plus whatever else you use.
Yes. So this is I forget if we talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning. Yeah, I think we did, but it's worth mentioning again because these platforms, there are many tools that are available right now that didn't exist a year ago. There are integration tools like Workato and Zapier, which can take data from different softwares and bring them all into a large language model that you license from OpenAI, for example, or Llama, or Anthropic. And then there are other development tools to turn that data, tag it, and turn it into unstructured data, basically into like a giant ChatGPT large language model, which your people can then start querying and asking it to do stuff. And then you can start running agents on top of that. You can do all that. But, I ain't doing that. You ain't doing that, Lauren. No offense. Right? I mean, you can barely plug in your TV. I know you. So, hey. I mean, you got to hire developers to do that stuff and bring it in. But the good news is that all the tools are there, and which a lot of these things didn't even exist a year or two ago. So you can do it. You can build your own thing, but you're going to have to hire a $200,000 a year developer to bring all this stuff together and build it and synchronize it and support it. If you really want some of that, to be happening. Even that Epicor, I'm using them again because it's fresh in my mind. They provide their own way to do that. Like because I asked them, and they're like, no, you can take everything from Epicor and bring it into this. We have our own large language model, and then you can use these integration tools like Workato to bring stuff in from your Salesforce or bring it in from your HR or whatever, and build your own thing out. And which is great. So they're all doing this. They're providing these tools. But I'm like, I'm not. It's not going to be for me to do. But it's there.
You're right. We have spoken about that before, and I suspect not too many people listening to this podcast are ready to take that leap and hire a developer and do that. Although I did hear from some last time after we talked about it who were intrigued by what you had to say and are thinking about it. All right, I got another stupid question for you, though. What's the difference between that, which you just described, kind of creating your own smaller large language model, and doing what ChatGPT already offers, which is kind of create your own GPT, where I know people are already using that. Someone on this podcast talked about using it for her public relations firm, where she has created her own GPT with brand information about one of her clients, so she can turn to that GPT and say, create a proposal specifically or a campaign specifically for this client. You already know everything you need to know about this client. What's the difference between that and the more ambitious?
So ChatGPT itself is they're competing with a number of applications out there. The most well-known is Google's Notebook LM. Very similar concept, where you upload files is what you're doing, and you are, which is what the person you were talking to is doing. And that is an absolutely great thing for a business. Say, I think we talked about this a while ago, where I started the process and then I stopped only because I got distracted. I'm going to get back to it, to upload all of our contracts and invoices and documents, proposals and estimates into Google Notebook LM, same as this ChatGPT, example. And then that way I can start querying it and having it do stuff for me. No, it's very similar. And OpenAI,
because you don't need a developer to do the version that I'm describing here. You will need a
developer if you're starting to bring in data from other systems. Like just uploading files is one thing. Okay, right. Sure. But if you're if you're in an ERP system, if you're using QuickBooks, you're using Sage, you're using Epicor, you're using Dynamics, whatever, it is not, for the faint of heart to bring that data into your OpenAI system. You got to develop and it's got to be synchronized and brought in a certain way. And that's the only difference. But no, that example that you're given, it's like a first steps for people to get into developing their own large language model. But if you want to bring in data from different systems, I think you can still use that, but you would need to be hiring somebody to do that unless that's something that's up your alley. Do you know what I mean?
It's kind of baby steps. You can use the create your own GPT system if you're just uploading your own files.
Correct.
I got it. Have you done that?
I have not. But it's definitely, I'm going to be reading more about it. I want to talk to companies that are doing it, or at least like stepping in. So that's something I want to cover.
Let me know when you do, because I want to read that.
I will.
You also wrote a piece recently about Forbes that touched on some of this stuff. It gave a bunch of takeaways for business owners. Anything we haven't already covered here?
No, we pretty much did. I mean, that's that's the latest with AI. It's still a big company game. The AI chatbots are getting smarter and better, and which is all great. If you want to build something yourself, you can, but it's still relatively expensive and complicated. But it's getting easier. So patience, my friend.
You did mention one thing I wanted to bring up in that article. You talked about regulation a little bit and how you're not expecting much coming at the federal level, but states are looking at it and they're focused on a couple of things. I think, misusing AI in the hiring process and kind of duping customers with questionable AI bots that maybe promise things that they can't actually deliver. It sounded like a good warning that businesses should be aware of, especially since this will vary from state to state. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, by the way, this comes, I wrote a piece on the 2025 Stanford AI Index. It was, a bunch of researchers did a whole bunch of update on the status of AI, in 2025. So I pointed out a bunch of things, 5 in particular, but one of them is exactly right. It's about regulations moving to the states. Right now, they say in 2026, there were just, a handful of, state regulations. Now it's going up to, in the past year alone, there's like 131 regulations at a number of different states around the country. And it does focus on people and hiring and, not using AI in a way that could be biased and not using AI that can dupe your customers into doing stuff that, could be potentially misleading. So, but if you are starting to implement AI in your business and it's going to be either customer facing or in the hiring process, I strongly recommend that you run it by a labor attorney and make sure that you've got no specific laws in your states that you need to make sure that you're in compliance with.
How do you run that by your attorney? If you're using AI to evaluate resumes or something like that, what's the conversation with an attorney like?
Well, it's just like if you look at the Stanford, it's called the 2025 Stanford AI Index. They have a chart in there. I didn't include it in my Forbes article, but it's a chart in there that shows all the states that have AI regulations. So if you're in Illinois, the usual suspects, right? California, New York, Illinois, if you're in like those states and others, and again, you are using an HR platform that uses AI, or maybe you're building out you're adding a chat bot to your website that's using, AI for automatic responses and things like that. That's your trigger for reaching out to, a labor attorney and saying, okay, well, I understand my state has got some regulations about AI. This is how we're using it in our business. Are we cool? That's how you do it.
Got it. Anything else you're working on that we should be looking for this week?
Yeah, I'm writing a piece on private equity, Lauren, for the Inquirer this week. That's, I don't know about you. I'm getting like 10 emails a week about private equity firms wanting to buy out my stupid little business. And, but I do have a lot of clients that are moving in that way. Private equity industry is just ballooned in the past 20 years.
They don't have the best reputation, Gene. Are you going to deal with that?
So that's why. So I interviewed a couple of people in that business with offering some advice for business owners that are thinking of doing something like that. So it's interesting.
Sort of what to watch out for, how to pick the right private equity firm.
Yep. Right. How do you pick them, and how do you align with them, and and then if you do decide to go down that road, what can you expect it to be? So because sometimes you have to have your eyes wide open if you're going to go down that path.
You're not going to sell your business out from under me anytime soon, are you, Gene?
I am not. My business ain't worth shit, Lauren. That's a whole.
Why are they contacting you?
They're just bot emails I'm getting. I mean, they have no
it's
idea.
AI?
Yeah,
Another AI mistake?
No idea. They have no idea.
Gene Marks is a CPA who writes weekly on small business for The Guardian, The Hill, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, The Chicago Daily Herald, Forbes, and Entrepreneur. You can also hear him on ABC Radio's Eye on the World with John Batchelor. Gene hosts 2 small business podcasts with Paychex Corporation and The Hartford. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Lauren.
Have a great week, everybody.